Hello and welcome, I'm Izzy at Minerva. Today we're looking at how to hack our very own Minerva Exclusive Jane sewing pattern. This is the basics of the pattern that you can see on the screen next to me, and what we're going to do is we are going to change it and alter the pattern pieces to create this look right here. So we are going to make it into a pinafore style garment, pinafore style dress. It's going to have buttons all the way up the front, which you can sew straight into the garment, or you can make them actually usable, which is what I'm going to be doing today. And then we're also going to raise the hem of the garment as well, so that it's a bit shorter. So I imagine you'd be wearing this with tights and boots. It would look really cool. Maybe layer it up with things underneath for the winter season. So I'm really excited about this hack. As you follow along today at home, you're going to need the Jane sewing pattern and a couple of your standard pattern drafting and sewing tools as well. Don't forget to cut out the pattern pieces in your size that you need in order to sew the pattern to fit you, and then starting at that point we'll then make the changes necessary. If you feel like you need extra support with either the choice of the type of fabric to choose to sew this pattern, how to sew the original sewing instructions, or also how to fit the basic garment, please do refer to our Minerva YouTube channel, where we have a playlist dedicated to our Minerva exclusive sewing patterns, and we have videos dedicated to those three topics right there to support you in your sewing journey. Before we get started today, I should mention what I'm wearing, which is our Minerva Core Range heavy stretch cotton jersey knit fabric, and this is in lime green. We're going to start off by altering pattern piece A, which is our Jane cocoon dress, and it is the front pattern piece. Now this pattern piece is currently cut on the fold. We're going to make changes to that centre front line in a couple of minutes, but let's start off by raising the hem. So on the pattern piece, we very helpfully have an approximate hip level annotated here for us. Now, depending on how short you want your garment to be, this is your opportunity to make that design decision. Whatever you choose to do though, I would recommend that you raise the hem so that it doesn't come up further than this notch here, or 1.5 centimeters away from that notch, just to allow for the hem. The reason is that this is the bottom of the pocket on the adjacent panel here. So from the hip level, I'm just going to drop a line that is 20 centimeters below the hip line. Now, that also allows for my 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, so it's actually going to be effectively 18.5 centimeters from the hip line when I wear the garment. Draw a line at that point and just trim off the excess. You might actually find it quite helpful just to annotate on this pattern piece how much you've taken up the hem by, so that you can come and refer back to that later on. The next thing we're going to look at is this centre front line here. So grab a piece of paper and pop it underneath. So this is my button, and my button is going to be placed right along the centre front line, which is this line here, which was previously cut on the fold. Now we're no longer going to be cutting it on the fold. That's not going to happen, because we want two separate parts to open up with the buttons at the front. So what we need to do is we basically need to place where those buttons are going to go. So what we want to do first is we want to mark where our 1.5 centimeter seam allowance is along the centre front, because that is going to dictate and show us where the top of the garment is going to be once it's been folded underneath. Obviously we've still got the neckband to add into this as well, but the button shouldn't extend higher than that point, because that will be taken up in the seam allowance. So you want your first button to be reasonably high up at that point. So just measure where that button needs to be. It's probably sitting about 5 millimeters below your seam allowance line. Next, mark where the seam allowance is for the hem down at the bottom. Just mark that on so you've got that seam allowance, that hemline, so when the garment is made, it's going to be turned up by 1.5 centimeters. Next thing you want to do is to determine where you want the bottom button to be. Obviously we've got the top one up here, and really this is, up to you. It's sort of a design preference really. I'm going to locate mine 5 centimeters above my hemline. I'm just going to put a little dot right there. So that's where my second one is going to go, right down at the bottom. And then depending on how many buttons you want to add into your garment, I'm going to add another 3 in. Basically you just want to distribute them evenly between the 2 points that you've already marked for your top and your bottom button. So for me, my distance is 56.5 centimetres. I'm going to divide that by 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I know that each of my buttons needs to be around 14 centimetres, 14.1 centimetres apart from each other. So let's just mark that on the centre front line. Okay, so we now know where our button placement is going to be, right down the centre front of the dress. What we want to do next is work out and draw in where our buttonholes need to go. So the buttonhole always extends over the centre front by a few millimetres. So the next thing we want to do is we actually want to draw the buttonhole lines in, and we want to mark them 2 millimetres away. They're starting off 2 millimetres away from the centre front along this line. So line up your ruler so it's 2 millimetres away and running parallel from the centre front line. Just mark a little series of lines here so you can see that nice and clearly, like that. And then you want to measure your button. So for me, my buttons are 2 centimetres. And so then you want to draw a line that is very simply, well for me, 2 centimetres in. And that's going to mark where your button line, your buttonhole needs to sit. Now the reason why we don't put the buttonhole centred on the button placement is because as we wear the garment, it's going to like pull, the two pieces are going to pull apart as we wear the garment. And so the button, this side is effectively just going to be pulled around to the side seam. So then the button placement would naturally slip to that side as the garment gets kind of pulled that way. So by saying I want my buttonhole just to be a couple of millimetres away from the centre front, that ensures that when the button is placed on the centre front and the buttonhole encases and goes over the button, that it's going to sit perfectly on the centre front. Okay, let's now create our button stand. Okay, so my button is 2 centimetres wide in total. That means it's going to extend to either side by 1 centimetre, either side of the centre front by 1 centimetre. Okay, next what we want to do is just to extend out the centre front line by the distance that we need for our button stand. So the button stand is the bit that sort of sits and stands and holds the buttons. So my button is 2 centimetres wide in total, so it extends over 1 centimetre past the centre front. So what I really want is for my button stand to extend slightly more than 1 centimetre, so I'm going to extend it by 1.5 centimetres. And I'm going to draw a line that's parallel to the centre front by 1.5 centimetres. And this is going to be a nice little dashed line. And now we just need to add the facing, which is the bit of fabric that turns under the garment and supports the button stand. So the facing needs to be at least to extend and be at least as wide as the buttonhole and just a little bit further, to be honest. So it needs to extend from here out. So I think 5 centimetres is looking quite nice for me. So if the fabric is folded at this point and tucked under, I want the raw edge of my facing to be at least 5 centimetres in. So working from the dashed line, draw a parallel line that is 5 centimetres offset from your fold line. Excellent. We don't need to add a seam allowance to that simply because we can just finish it using an overlock or just cut it and then fold it under. Excellent. So that is all basically done. The only thing we need to sort out is what is going on up here. So to start off with, I'm just going to extend and draw a line that is perpendicular to the centre front out to hit my fold line, just like that. I'm then actually going to fold my piece of paper under at the fold line. And what we have now is a beautiful line up here just to follow. So I'm just going to dash that out. So I can see that's where the curve of my neckline is going to be when I fold my actual fabric under. So now I can just cut along that line. And we can fold it back out again. And there we have it, a beautiful bit of facing on this side. That's wonderful. We've basically done all we need to do for the front, but we've got the neckline pattern piece to look at too. So the original pattern piece E, which is our neck band, is supposed to be cut on the fold, sewn together into a nice circle, and then attached onto the circular neckline. However, we have now created this opening up at the front, so we can't sew our neckband in a circle anymore. It needs to have a start and a finish. Now, That's all very well, but we've also extended out our pattern piece here by 1.5 centimetres. So all we need to do is to add that extra bit here onto the pattern piece. We just need to add 1.5 centimetres. So just draw a line that is 1.5 centimetres away from the end on this side here, and then just extend out the rectangle along its length as well. Excellent, just like that. Excellent. Okay, let's now move on to the other pattern piece for the front. Okay, so we've got pattern piece C here, which is our lower side front, and that will be attaching onto this pattern piece, lining up these notches here and here. As you can see, we need to crop it and make it shorter. Now we removed, for me, 18.3 centimetres, so we're basically just going to do the same on this piece. And because I've lined up the notches, I can literally just draw a line straight across. Cut off the hemline. Now, I don't know if you can see, but at the bottom here, there's a nice little straight bit like that. So I want to actually sort of duplicate that because that allows for the hem just to be turned up nice and neatly. So I'm going to grab my pen and I'm just going to trace around that. All that's doing is basically just giving us a nice straight bit to be able to turn our hem up. And I'm just going to smooth out that curve a little bit as well so it's nice and soft, just like that. And if you need to, just remark in that little notch. Excellent. Let's move on to the back. Okay, and the exact same principle applies to the back pattern piece, which is here. I've lined it up with the notch there, and we can just extend the hemline out. Make sure your hemline still runs perpendicular to the centre back line. And just remove that volume. Once again, let's just pick up on this little indent here. So just line that up and just trace it off, that straight line at that point. And then just true up that curve again. Make sure you've added your notch. And there we have it. Excellent. Let's now go and sew up our pattern pieces. As mentioned in the beginning, I'm only going to demo the steps that have changed and have altered to the original pattern pieces. If you want extra support with the standard steps, please refer back to our sew along, which we have on our Minerva YouTube channel. In this video, I've chosen to use the Minerva Exclusive Savannah Daisy loopback French terry stretch knit fabric. This has got a really lovely bold print and it's really nice and stretchy. As mentioned previously, I'm only going to demonstrate any steps that differ from those in the instruction pack. So I've already done steps 1, 2 and 3 because those are exactly the same for this hack. The only thing is obviously that these are a little bit shorter. So we've got the nice front side panels all ready to go with our gorgeous little pockets. The next step is step 4, and what we're doing, the big overview here is we're going to sew the front seams together and also sew the shoulder seams together. Step 4 is where we slightly differ and deviate from the main instructions, although it really is very similar, it's just the pieces look different. So the first thing we want to do is actually to attach the front side panel to the main front pattern piece. Our front pattern piece A is actually not one piece, it's 2 pieces. So let's take a quick look at that. So our front pattern piece A has got the inbuilt facing built into it because we're going to put our cute little buttons down the front here and buttonholes down the other side as well. So what we need to do first of all is actually to cut a piece of interfacing that is the same size as this facing piece here. Lovely. So just like that, what we're going to do is attach the facing to the wrong side of the garment just along that strip here. Okay, so they've both now got their interfacing on. This is fusible interfacing that I've used, and we'll tag the product below the video as well so you can see it there. The next thing I'm going to do is just finish off those seams using an overlocker. Excellent, so those have just been nice and neatly overlocked. And then where we've got the little notches up at the top and down the bottom, that should be right on the edge of where your interfacing is, we're just going to fold them over and press in place where the notches are. And that's just going to create our nice, neat facing. Wonderful. Now the final thing we want to do in order just to prep the centre front is we basically want to sew our facing down. So I'm going to sew a line of stitches, and I'm going to sew them from the front actually. I'm going to sew it this way up on my machine just so I get a nice neat top stitch all the way down. And I want my line of stitches just to capture this fabric. So if you grab your tape measure, I'm going to sew a line of top stitching at 4.5 centimetres away from the folded edge, and that's just going to capture this cut edge of the facing to the main body. Excellent. Okay, so just like that. Okay, next we're going to get our side pattern pieces, and you can see where the notches are going to be lining up in these 3 areas. And so with right sides together, we're just going to pin the centre front pieces with the front side panel pieces, the ones with our pockets on. So just pin as required all the way along, and then we're going to do the same on the other side for the other front and side front pattern pieces. And then we're going to sew them, and then we're going to overlock them together, finish them really nicely and neatly. Brilliant. Once you've done your side seams like that, and you've got 2 front pattern pieces, you can then just continue along with step 6, which is sewing the shoulder seams together, step 7, which is sewing the side seams together, and then we can also do the armbands. For the arms can also be done. Just ignore the neckband for now. Excellent. So here's our little garment. It's almost there. We've got our armbands in now. Everything else is sort of done in terms of the main body. What we're going to do next is to attach the neckband to the neckline. Obviously this is no longer a full circumference, it's no longer a full circle. We've got a nice opening here. So we need to be able to finish our neckband nicely and neatly so that it's going to attach onto here and, you know, look beautiful and have a really nice crisp finish. So what I'm going to suggest we do is actually fold the band over with right sides together and then just stitch a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance all the way down the short end. Do the same for the other side. Excellent. And once you've done that, then we're just going to trim the corners and just trim down the whole of the seam allowance in half. And do the same for the other side. Next, we're going to turn those points right side out, so the wrong sides are together, to give us a nice crisp finish to those ends of the neckband. That looks so good. Okay, and what we're going to do now is that we're going to get our neckband and we're just going to attach it all the way around in the same manner that we would, you know, for the original neckband or for the arm bands. We're just going to line up the centre front or the extended centre front just really nicely and neatly to start off with right sides together. And then just distribute the rest of the neckband nice and evenly around the rest of the perimeter of the top. Great, and once you've pinned it all in place, we'll just sew using our standard seam allowance all the way down. And once you've sewn it together, let's just overlock that or finish that raw edge using whatever method you would prefer. Okay, and then let's just finish this seam in the same way that we finished the armhole seam, just by doing a nice little top stitch to hold that seam down. Brilliant. Okay, so let's just hem the bottom next and then we'll put in the buttons. So we're just going to hem this in the same way it says in the instruction booklet, but obviously we're just hemming it with an open front. So we're just going to overlock and finish the raw edge of the hem, fold it under 1.5 centimetres and then top stitch it. Okay, fabulous. So now is the time to actually put and prep the buttons. We've done everything else we need to the garment. Don't forget that as we do this, the right side of the garment is going to go on top of the left side as you wear it. So as I wear it, this will be my right and this will be my left on my body. So I'm going to create the buttonholes first on the right hand side. So here's the pattern piece. And I'm just going to fold it where the fold line is. Okay, so now those are matching up beautifully. We've obviously taken off the hem allowance there, but then we've added the neckband in at the top here. So the very first button that I want to do, I've said it needs to be like starting here. So just using a nice little piece of chalk, just mark the locations for each of those little buttonholes onto the right hand side of the garment. And then we just want to get the offset correct so that the buttonholes are going to be just in the exact right location. So on here, they're 1.3 centimetres in from the folded line. So just mark that 1.3 centimetres in from the folded line along each of those button placement locations. Okay, and then let's create our buttonholes. We're going to start sewing our buttonholes at the cross and then sew out and then back again. These are the buttons that I've picked, and I'm just going to use my buttonhole machine foot to sew these buttonholes on my machine. Once you've created your buttonholes, I've created my 5 ones here now, we're just going to sew the buttons into the corresponding location on the left hand side of the body, and then let's go and take a look and see what it looks like. Here's our gorgeous little Jane hack, looking stunning. I love that mini skirt look with the button up front. It completely transforms how this pattern looks and how it's working together. I love the way that you could alter and change those buttons to be really dramatic or just really subtle. And obviously we're still keeping the integrity of the pattern with that gorgeous cocoon little shape around the hips and down the legs with those lovely pockets too. So there we go, we've finished our little pattern hack looking at that Jane dress. We've got plenty more of these on our YouTube channel, so if you're interested in using this pattern as a base in order to change it and make lots of different versions, please do take a look for a little bit of inspiration on our YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me today. I've been Izzy at Minerva. See you.